So, imagine you're serving pasta to a guy with bodyguards. You spot a hit going down. What do you do? Sofia wrote a note. He read it. Everything changed. 26. Rent due. 2 jobs. A mom in New Jersey who still thought she was working at a bank. This was survival. Quiet, contained, routine. And then the doors opened. 3 men walked in first. Coordinated. Eyes alert. Suits too sharp to be accidental. They didn't sit. They scanned. Then came him. He didn't need a name to turn heads. The air inside the Caprice tightened the moment his polished shoes hit the marble. His presence moved like gravity, inevitable, quiet, deadly. Dark hair swept back with care. Tattoos climbed above his collar like whispered warnings. And when he unbuttoned his jacket to sit, the entire room read the message. He didn't need protection, but he had it anyway. "That's Marco DeLuca," whispered one of the other servers, her voice barely audible over the soft string music. Don DeLuca, head of the North Side. But to Sofia, the name meant nothing. Not yet. She was 2 months into her job at the Caprice, too tired to follow city gossip and too focused on tips to Google Mafia family trees. The man at table 9 was just another customer. Until she noticed the 3 men near the bar. They weren't looking at the menu, or the wine list, or the art. They were looking at him. Sofia had grown up around bars and bad neighborhoods. She'd seen men pretend to be casual while planning something ugly. She recognized the tension in the jaw, the strategic angles of chairs, the silent signal between one adjusting his cuff and the other checking his phone. It was a setup. Not her business, she told herself. Serve the pasta, smile, walk away. Live small. Stay alive. But something in her gut, old, sharp, trained by years of protecting the vulnerable, rebelled. As she stepped forward with the dish, her hand trembled. Not from fear. From decision. She reached into her apron, ripped the corner off a paper order slip, and scrawled 6 words in looping shorthand. Trap. 3 behind you. Exit now. She slipped it beneath the plate like a garnish and straightened. Their eyes met. His gaze narrowed. Confusion. Then calculation. Then a flicker of something that almost looked like curiosity. 3 beats later, he stood without a word. By midnight, bodies were in the river. Rumors were in the wind. And Sofia Leone, who had once been invisible, had just become the most protected civilian in the city. The SUV's tinted windows turned the city into shadows, neon flickers sliding like ghosts across Sofia's anxious face. She sat sandwiched between 2 men in tailored black suits, each silent, each larger than necessary. No one explained where they were going or who had given the order. Her phone was gone, her apron still dusted with flour, and her throat still dry from the rush of adrenaline that hadn't stopped since she'd passed that note. Only the weight of what she'd done was real, thick, undeniable, permanent. They arrived at a private garage beneath a building that smelled like new money and old secrets. Sofia was ushered through a service elevator, up to the penthouse level, where silence echoed off marble floors. A 3rd man opened double doors into a room too dark to be welcoming and too lavish to be anything but dangerous. Waiting inside was another man, not Marco, but older, lean, and sharp-eyed like a wolf. He gestured to a velvet chair. "Sit. We won't ask twice." Sofia sat, slow and tense, back straight, hands on her lap like she was about to be judged in a courtroom. The wolf-eyed man remained standing, arms crossed, staring as if her face held some code. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why did you do it?" She blinked. "Because I saw something and I couldn't unsee it." "That's not good enough," he snapped, though his tone was more curious than cruel. "You risked your life for someone like him. That's not instinct, that's intent." Sofia tilted her chin. "I didn't know who he was." A pause. "And I don't need to. I've seen enough violence to know when it's about to happen." The man considered this, then turned and walked away without a word. She sat in the silence for minutes that felt like hours, wondering what kind of world required a panel of guards just to speak. Then the door opened again. He entered like a storm with a center of calm, Marco DeLuca, still in the same black suit, no tie, shirt open just enough to reveal the gold chain and tattooed lines beneath. His eyes were colder than they had been in the restaurant, sharper. But when they landed on her, something flickered behind them. "Sofia Leone," he said. She opened her mouth, unsure what words to use for a man like him. "Thank you? You're welcome? Sorry?" But he raised a hand, silencing her before she spoke. "You saved my life," he said plainly. "Which means your life is now in danger." Sofia leaned forward. "I didn't ask for that." "No," Marco said, voice low, controlled, deliberate. "But you took it anyway. You passed me a note in front of witnesses. You became part of something. I was trying to prevent bloodshed, not join a war. You succeeded at the first," he said, "but the second, that's no longer your choice." He sat across from her, one leg crossed over the other, power radiating in stillness. "We traced the shooters. Low-level freelancers, contracted through a middleman we've never used before. That only happens if someone inside leaked my location." Sofia's breath caught. "Someone close to you?" Marco nodded once. "That's the part that keeps me up." "I can't protect you if you go home," he added. "Your apartment's already been accessed." Nothing missing, but drawers moved. Someone was looking for something. Or leaving a message. Sofia's heart dropped. "Oh my God." Marco's expression hardened. "Tonight, you don't sleep in your apartment. You come with me." Sofia pushed to her feet, frustration boiling beneath the fear. "You don't get to decide my life. I already did. The second you got involved. I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I don't want enemies," Marco said. "But we don't always get to choose what we inherit." She paced, hands in her hair, trying to make the world slow down. "I'm just a waitress. I serve pasta and refill wine glasses. I don't do guns and politics and underground wars." Marco watched her unravel, then stood slowly. "And yet you noticed what none of my men did. You saw it first. That makes you more than just a waitress." The words silenced her, not out of flattery, but truth. She had seen it. She had acted. And now there was blood in the water. Marco walked to the bar in the corner, poured 2 glasses of something amber and expensive, and handed her one. "To instincts," he said. "They may be all that keep you alive." She didn't drink it, but held the glass with both hands, grounding herself. "So what happens now? You're going to stay in a place we control. A safe house, guarded, unlisted. No phones. No surprises. And after that? We find the leak. And we end this." There was finality in the way he said it, not if. When? As they descended to the underground garage again, the energy around Marco had shifted. The guards were tighter now. His steps were sharper. Sofia felt like a foreign object orbiting a violent sun. But when the back door of the car opened, he gestured for her to enter first. Like she mattered. The drive was quiet, unmarked streets bleeding into industrial corners of the city. Eventually, they pulled into an underground garage attached to what looked like a converted brownstone, old bones, modern steel. Inside, the safe house was deceptively simple. Clean walls, cameras in every corner, one steel-reinforced panic room hidden behind a closet. "This place is for emergencies," Marco said. "And now you're one." A guard handed her a change of clothes, a disposable phone, and a look that said, "Don't make trouble." She stood in the middle of the apartment, dazed. "How long am I supposed to stay here?" Marco didn't answer. He just walked to the window, stared out at a skyline blurred by storm clouds. "Until I say it's safe." Sofia didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the guest bed, listening to the air vent hum and her heartbeat echo. Somewhere outside, she imagined people still sipping wine at the Caprice, laughing over tiramisu, never knowing what had almost happened. And somewhere further out, someone was angry that she'd interfered. Someone who now knew her name. At dawn, Marco returned with a tablet under one arm and a tension in his jaw that hadn't eased. "Surveillance pulled footage from the street cams," he said. "The shooters were tracked to a warehouse in Red Hook. They never made it back out." Sofia frowned. "You got to them?" Marco just nodded. 2 were already dead. The third talked. She didn't ask how they made him talk. She didn't want to know. Marco continued. "He claimed they were fed my location by someone inside. Gave a name." "Whose?" Marco's jaw clenched. "Luca Carvalho." My consigliera's nephew. Sofia froze. You're telling me the guy advising you has a family member trying to kill you? Marco's voice dropped to a whisper. And that's why we can't afford mercy. Because the next move won't be freelance. It'll be personal. Strategic. Measured. Then what happens to the consigliere? We'll find out where his loyalties lie, Marco said. If blood outweighs truth. The world shifted again beneath Sofia's feet. A mafia boss with traitors in his house. A waitress who was now a liability, a witness, a complication. She didn't know where this ended, only that it had already gone too far. Marco looked at her and said quietly, I know you didn't ask for this. But now that you're in it, there's no way out but through. She nodded slowly, voice quiet. Then I guess I better understand what I'm walking through. Marco's expression didn't soften, but his eyes did. Good, he said. Because this story? It only gets darker from here. The safe house was quiet, but it was not peace. Sofia had barely eaten, her appetite held hostage by uncertainty and the low-grade fear that hummed through her veins like static. She paced the apartment as sunlight filtered in through reinforced windows, casting golden lines across sterile walls. Every surface felt too clean, too staged, like a movie set designed for survival, not life. Marco hadn't returned since dawn, and the silence was starting to feel louder than the city ever did. When the elevator hummed and the door unlocked with a soft click, she nearly dropped the glass she'd been holding. Marco stepped inside with 2 coffees in one hand and that same unreadable look on his face. Didn't know how you take it, he said, offering her one without ceremony. She took it anyway. I take it with answers, she replied. He smirked faintly and set his own cup down, rolling up his sleeves. I figured you'd want to know more, he said, nodding toward the couch. So ask. She didn't sit. What are the rules? Not just for me, but for you. You keep talking like this world runs on order, but all I've seen is violence wrapped in nice suits. Marco's expression darkened, but not with offense, more like memory. There are rules, he said. Civilians are off limits. Always. No women, no kids, no chaos unless it's calculated. If I can't look my mother in the eye after a job, I don't greenlight it. Sofia blinked. Your mother? He nodded. She raised me harder than the streets ever could. Sofia sat then, finally, letting the coffee warm her hands. You talk like a man who believes in morality while managing criminal empires. Marco chuckled once, dry. There's morality in everything, even war. It's just twisted through the lens of survival and legacy. He paused. I don't run drugs. I don't touch trafficking. And if one of my men even looks the wrong way at a civilian, I make sure they're not my men anymore. She studied him, unsure if she believed it all, but some part of her wanted to. Why tell me all this? She asked. Because if you're staying under my protection, you need to understand what that means, he said. You're not furniture. You're not decoration. You're a symbol now, and symbols are powerful or dangerous depending on who's looking. Sofia stared down at her coffee, her voice quieter. I grew up around this. Not this level, but close. My cousin ran numbers in Jersey, disappeared when I was 14. My mom used to make me walk the long way home to avoid drive-bys. I knew how to spot danger before I knew how to do algebra. Marco's gaze sharpened with interest. That's how you saw it, he said. At the restaurant. The way they were seated. The timing. The tension. She nodded. 3 of them didn't blink when the music changed. One adjusted his jacket like he was stretching, but never leaned back. The 3rd never touched his water. There was a pause. Then Marco said quietly, my best men missed it. You didn't. Sofia looked at him. Maybe your best men don't know what it's like to live scared. He didn't respond, but something in his posture shifted, like her words had struck a chord he didn't want to admit existed. Later that afternoon, he took her to one of his private properties, Club Vanta, a discreet, velvet-draped lounge that didn't advertise and didn't need to. The kind of place with no menu and too many secrets. He said it would be safer to move between locations, harder to trace patterns. She didn't argue. Inside, it smelled like incense and old money. The lighting was low, the music jazz. Guards moved through shadows like panthers in tuxedos. Sofia stayed close but observant, her gaze flicking from room to room. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. That's when she saw him. A man near the bar, young, lean, hands twitching just slightly. He laughed too loudly when spoken to, looked away too fast when Marco entered the room. Sofia's stomach tightened. She watched him again, slower. He wasn't drinking. He was sweating. She leaned into Marco's shoulder, lowering her voice. "Who's that?" Marco followed her line of sight. "Rico. One of ours." "Why?" Sofia didn't blink. "Because he's scared of you, but pretending he's not. That's either guilt or bad acting." Marco stiffened, just slightly, but enough. His eyes stayed on Rico as he gave a nod to one of his men nearby. Rico didn't notice the shift, but he was already being watched more closely. "You sure?" Marco asked. "I've seen 100 people lie to cops," Sofia replied. "He's not just scared. He's hiding something." They didn't confront Rico then. Marco didn't play that way. Instead, he pulled Sofia into a quiet booth and poured them both a drink. "You keep doing that," he said. "Noticing things. Reading people." She sipped. "Would you rather I didn't?" "No," he said. "I'd rather you understand what it costs." The way he said it wasn't a threat, it was a warning. "People in my world get killed for knowing less than what you already do." Sofia's jaw tightened. "Then maybe I should leave your world." Marco's gaze was steady. "You could. But they'd still come for you. And I wouldn't be there to stop them." The silence between them stretched, uneasy, not unkind. Sofia set her glass down. "I didn't ask to be important," she said. "I didn't ask to be anything. I just couldn't let you die." Marco nodded once, the mask slipping just enough for her to see the man beneath. "And that," he said, "is the part they don't understand. That mercy is more dangerous than bullets." By the time they left the club, Rico had disappeared from the main floor. Sofia didn't ask where he went. Marco didn't say. But she knew this much: the walls had eyes, and not all of them were loyal. And the more time she spent in Marco's world, the more she realized how few people actually survived it. If you saw something that could save someone's life, but put your own at risk, would you speak up? Tell us in the comments, would you have done what Sofia did? And if you want to see what happens next, subscribe to follow the story. The next morning, Sofia woke to the sound of voices, low, tense, and unmistakably male. She didn't recognize the language at first, but the tone was universal, danger being measured and contained. She padded toward the kitchen in borrowed clothes, her bare feet silent on polished floors. Marco stood at the center of the room, flanked by 2 of his men and a tablet glowing with security footage. He didn't notice her at first, but the moment he did, he lifted a hand and the conversation stopped cold. "Come here," he said, voice quiet but sharp. Sofia moved beside him, eyes drifting to the screen. It was grainy security footage from Club Banta, time-stamped from the night before. There, by the bar, was Rico, the man she'd flagged. At first, it looked like nothing, him fidgeting, glancing, sweating. But then Marco zoomed in. Rico pulling out a phone, holding it low, typing something rapid-fire while pretending to scroll. Behind him, 2 guards chatted, unaware. "He was texting during a secured meet," Marco muttered. "And now he's gone." Sofia crossed her arms, heart pounding. "You think he tipped someone off?" "I don't think," Marco said. "I know." Another man entered the room, older, elegant, with silver temples and grief in his eyes. Salvatore Carvalho, Marco's consigliere. "He's not answering," he said flatly. "His phone's cold. His GPS is spoofed. We lost him." Marco looked up, jaw tightening. "He's your nephew." Salvatore's silence was louder than any excuse. Sofia watched as the air in the room turned thick with betrayal. Marco exhaled slowly, deliberately. "You vouched for him. You placed him in this house." Salvatore's face didn't change, but his hands curled at his sides. "He's blood, Marco. I raised him when his father went down. I taught him everything: loyalty, structure, code. I never thought, you never looked," Marco cut in. "Because blood is thicker than suspicion." Sofia stepped forward, unable to stay silent. "He knew everything, didn't he? Your routes. Your meetings. The caprice." Marco nodded. "He knew I'd be there that night. And he knew I'd let my guard down." Salvatore's voice cracked. "Let me bring him in. Let me fix this." No, Marco said, hard now. If he's turned, we don't bring him in. We shut him out. And fast. Sofia watched as Salvatore's mask crumbled, not all at once, but in small cracks. The man had clearly loved his nephew, clearly believed in him. But now he stood between the loyalty of blood and the survival of the Empire. I failed you, Salvatore whispered. Worse, I failed him. And now everyone's going to pay the price. Outside, the sky darkened, even though it was barely noon. Thunder rumbled far off, as if the world itself sensed a fracture had split through the core of something once solid. Sofia sat on the edge of a chair while Marco barked orders into a burner phone, deploying crews, pulling assets. The word containment was used more than once. But there was no containing betrayal once it had festered inside. When Marco finally sat across from her, he looked older. Not in his face, but in his eyes. Like a man who had just buried trust with his own hands. You were right, he said simply. About Rico. About watching the small things. Sofia nodded, but the validation felt hollow. I wish I hadn't been. Marco dragged a hand down his face. The problem isn't just the leak. It's what it represents. Someone close to me sold me out, and the other families are watching. Waiting. Measuring my weakness like wolves scenting blood. This wasn't just about killing you, Sofia said quietly. It was a warning. Marco nodded slowly, and I heard it loud and clear. That night, Marco called a closed meeting, just 6 men, trusted lieutenants, old guards, no one under 40. Sofia wasn't invited, but she heard parts of it from the hallway. Words like containment, escalation, and optics floated through the thick walls. They weren't just discussing strategy, they were rewriting the rules of survival. And at the center of it all was a man who used to be family. Later, as Marco stood by the window nursing a drink, Sofia joined him in silence. The city stretched below them, indifferent, endless, glittering like temptation. You still think you can control this? She asked. He turned, mouth a thin line. No. I know I can't. But I can survive it. And make sure you do too. Sofia leaned on the windowsill, watching headlights blur on the street below. He looked like a scared kid, she said. Rico. Like someone who hadn't realized how deep he was until it was too late. Or someone who realized it and didn't care, Marco replied. Because someone else promised him more. More than loyalty? More than life, maybe, Marco murmured. Or less. Some men sell their souls cheap. The following morning brought worse news. Rico had surfaced, briefly, on a traffic cam 2 boroughs away. A black sedan with no plates. A meeting place triangulated near an old warehouse. By the time Marco's team arrived, the building had been cleared, torched, and tagged with a single message scrawled on the wall in spray paint. You're slipping, DeLuca. It wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration. A signal to other bosses that Marco's house had cracks in its foundation. And now everyone was watching to see how it collapsed or how hard it fought back. Sofia stood in the burnt remains of the warehouse, shivering in the smoke, and realized how far she'd come from that white tablecloth dining room where all of this had started. Marco walked past her, phone pressed to his ear, voice a blade, locked down every front, double security at every entrance. Anyone looks sideways, we shut them down. Sofia didn't ask who he was talking to. She already knew. This wasn't just cleanup, it was war preparation. As they returned to the SUV, Sofia finally broke the silence. Do you trust anyone? Marco didn't answer at first. Then I did. He glanced at her. And right now, you're the only one who hasn't let me down. She didn't say anything in return, but she didn't need to. Because when betrayal starts in the mirror, loyalty becomes the rarest currency of all. The SUV turned off the main road and dipped down a narrow ramp behind a nondescript auto shop in the Bronx. To anyone else, it looked like another forgotten block swallowed by urban silence. But behind the steel shutters and weathered brick was something else entirely, a private residence built like a fortress. Sofia didn't speak as the gates slid open and revealed manicured grounds, surveillance turrets, and more security than most embassies. Marco sat beside her in the back seat, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. The car stopped in front of a sleek black door that opened before they even stepped out. Inside, The air smelled like cedar and leather, not metal and fear. Warm lighting, thick rugs, dark wood, and art on the walls that wasn't just expensive, it was personal. There were photos, two black and white portraits, one of a woman with Marco's eyes and a smile that felt honest. Sofia slowed by the frame, and Marco's voice came from behind her, low and quiet. My mother. She made this place before she died. Said the world was ugly, so home had to be beautiful. Sofia didn't know what to say to that. So she followed him through the hallway, past a piano she could tell hadn't been played in years, and into the kitchen. It wasn't what she expected, no chef staff, no marble ostentation. Just a long wooden table, dim pendant lights, and two plates already set. Marco gestured to the chair across from him. Figured we deserved a night without someone trying to kill us. She gave him a look, almost smiling. That your idea of small talk? Closest I've got. They sat, and someone, one of his men, maybe, served a simple meal. Pasta, salad, a bottle of red wine already breathing. I don't eat like this every night, Marco said, uncorking the bottle. But when I do, I try to remember I'm human. They ate in relative silence for a while, the clink of forks and the occasional crackle from the fireplace filling the space. Outside, the world buzzed with the quiet tension of a city on edge, but inside these walls, there was a strange, temporary calm. Sofia sipped the wine slowly, letting it settle into her bones like something earned. I haven't felt safe in years, she said finally. Not really. Not since I was a kid. Marco paused with his glass halfway to his mouth. Me neither. He said it like a confession, not a comparison. I grew up surrounded by people who only knew how to take. Loyalty was a weapon. Trust was bait. The first time I held a gun, I was 12. The first time I used it, I was 13. Sofia didn't flinch. She just looked at him differently, like she was seeing through the expensive suit and sharp jaw to the broken scaffolding beneath. You ever think about getting out? She asked. Every time I close my eyes, he replied. But this world doesn't let you leave clean. You either burn it down or it burns you first. They moved to the living room after dinner, the bottle of wine following them. Sofia curled into the corner of the couch, knees drawn up, while Marco sat opposite her, the firelight throwing shadows across his face. You're different when you're here, she said. Like you're not carrying as much. Marco nodded once. This place was supposed to be mine and my mother's escape. Then she died, and it just became a bunker. Sofia leaned her head back against the cushion. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd made different choices. Marco looked at her, his voice softer. You made the one that saved mine. She let that sit between them. Heavy, true, irreversible. I didn't do it for you, she said. I did it because I couldn't watch someone die when I could stop it. Marco stood, walked to the bar cart, and poured 2 fingers of something stronger. He handed it to her without a word. That instinct? It's going to get you hurt in my world. Sofia took the glass, staring into it. Then maybe I shouldn't be in your world. Marco's eyes didn't leave hers. Maybe not. But here you are. The night stretched on, heavy and fragile all at once. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But something between them shifted, an invisible thread pulled tighter, more dangerous for how unseen it was. When Sofia finally retreated to the guest room, her head swam, not from the wine, but from proximity to a man who wasn't just a criminal, but something far more complex. And far more dangerous. She sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling aimlessly through the burner phone Marco had given her. There were no contacts, no apps, just calls and texts. Most were blank. Until the screen flashed with an unknown number. A single message, he can't protect you forever. Her blood ran cold. She stared at the text for a full minute before moving. Quietly, she opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Marco was still awake, leaning against the glass wall of the balcony, staring out at the city like he was waiting for it to make the next move. I got a message, she said. He turned immediately. From who? I don't know, she said. But they know this number. And they know I'm with you. Marco crossed the room in 3 strides, took the phone and read it. His jaw clenched. It's starting. She didn't ask what it meant. She already knew. Not just retaliation. Not just pressure. It was war. If you were in Sofia's place, Would you stay with the one person who could protect you, even if it meant stepping into danger with them? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see how Sofia faces what's coming next, subscribe so you don't miss a moment. Sofia woke to the sound of boots. Not the casual shuffle of someone moving through a hallway, but the rapid, purposeful strike of urgency. The bedside clock read 4:27 a.m., but the house was alive with tension, men barking orders into radios, the distinct click of weapons being loaded. She pushed the blanket aside and moved toward the door, heart pounding. When she opened it, a guard nearly knocked her over. "Ma'am, we need to move. Now." "What's happening?" she asked, breath catching. The man didn't answer, just pressed a hand to his earpiece and motioned her forward. As they rounded the corner, Marco appeared, gun holstered, shirt half-buttoned, blood already on his knuckles. "The safe house is compromised," he said without preamble. "We've been leaked." Sofia blinked at him, trying to make sense of the chaos. "What do you mean compromised?" "The traitor, he gave them the address," Marco said, voice flat. "They're on their way. We've got 10 minutes, maybe less." The front doors burst open and more guards rushed in, surrounding her like she was a diplomat and the world had just declared war. "Get her in the second car." Decoy formation. Sofia grabbed Marco's arm. "Wait, what about you?" "I'll be right behind you," he promised, eyes hard but calm. "You're not the target, not today. But they'll use you to get to me." Someone tugged her away, practically lifting her off the ground as the team moved toward the garage. She didn't fight, but her chest burned with the sharp sting of helplessness. Every instinct screamed to stay near Marco, but every second counted. And in this world, trust meant letting go at the worst possible moment. The SUV doors slammed shut, bulletproof glass sealing her inside. 2 men sat in the front, another beside her, all armed, silent, alert. As they peeled away from the garage, Sofia watched the rearview mirror, Marco standing at the gates, framed by floodlights, pistol drawn, eyes locked on the horizon. Then they turned a corner and he was gone. The convoy split at the intersection. "We're decoy," the driver said without looking back. "Real asset, Marco and the second team will divert west." Sofia nodded, gripping the edge of the seat. Her hands trembled, but she refused to show it. The city outside was still dark, still sleeping, unaware it had become a battlefield. They didn't make it 3 blocks. The black sedan that appeared from nowhere T-boned the SUV with bone-rattling force. Metal screamed as the vehicle spun, tires shrieking, glass spider-webbing under the pressure. "Hold on," the driver yelled, but the words were swallowed by the impact. The car hit a hydrant and flipped, landing hard on its side. Sofia's head slammed against the door frame, stars bursting behind her eyes. For a moment, everything was still. Then shouting outside and inside. Gunfire erupted, staccato and close, like the city itself had exploded. The man beside her kicked out the shattered window, pulled her through, and shoved her behind the wreck. "We're pinned," he screamed into his radio. "We need backup now." Sofia crouched, heart pounding in her ears, the taste of blood at the back of her throat. She could hear boots on asphalt, the crunch of glass, and then the snap of a suppressed round, inches from her face. One of their men went down hard, and the other pulled her tighter against the metal. "Run when I say," he whispered. "No matter what." Sofia opened her mouth to argue, but he was already moving. A second SUV pulled into view, tires screeching. Doors flew open. Marco was the first out. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He walked into the line of fire like it was a hallway he'd paced 1,000 times. Gun up, eyes scanning, trigger steady. He moved like a man who had nothing left to fear, only something to protect. One by one, he dropped them. The attackers scattered at the sight of him, 2 falling before they could even raise their weapons. The others turned, tried to retreat, but they didn't make it far. Marco hunted them down without mercy, face a blank slate of rage and precision. When the last one hit the pavement, he didn't check for survivors. He holstered his gun and turned to Sofia. Her breath hitched when she saw him bloodied, bruised, eyes wild. Not the polished Don from Caprice Room. Not the careful man who sipped wine across from her last night. This was the predator. This was the monster the streets whispered about. But what terrified her most was that she wasn't afraid. He ran to her, hand reaching, cupping her face like it might disappear. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes scanning her for wounds. "No," she whispered. "But you're bleeding." He didn't look down. "Then I'm still breathing." She stared at him, red on his collar, bruises blooming on his jaw, knuckles raw and split, and felt something primal click into place. This was a man forged in violence. Not just surviving it, but shaped by it. And still, somehow, he'd come for her. Not power. Not pride. Just her. Marco helped her to her feet as sirens echoed in the distance. "We have to move before the cops box in the street," he said, voice tight. She didn't argue. She didn't even look back at the wreckage. She just followed him into the waiting car, heart pounding in strange rhythm with his. As the SUV sped off, she glanced sideways. He was already dialing, barking orders, arranging cleanup. But for one brief second, he reached for her hand. Held it. And didn't let go. The safe house had changed. Same walls, same guards, same thick silence. But now it felt thinner, like the world outside was pressing harder to get in. Sofia sat on the edge of the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, blood-stained denim folded at her ankles like discarded skin. She hadn't slept since the ambush, and neither had Marco. He paced near the windows like a man who'd come back from the edge and didn't know what to do with the silence. Sofia watched him, anger and confusion twisting inside her like fire trapped in a glass jar. "Why do I matter to you?" she asked suddenly, the question ripping out of her like a wound that had waited too long to be opened. "You have an empire. 1,000 soldiers. Millions in muscle and money. So why me?" Marco froze, his back to her, jaw tensing. He turned slowly, walked toward her, and knelt in front of the couch like he was laying something at her feet. "Because you did what no one else would. You warned me. You didn't know who I was, didn't care. You just saw a man about to die and stepped in. You reminded me who I used to be before this life turned me into something cold." Sofia blinked, surprised by the softness behind his words. "What does that even mean?" she whispered. Marco sat beside her, his voice low, steady. "When I was 12, I watched my mother die because someone wanted to send my father a message. She wasn't supposed to be involved. She was just a wife. A mother. A civilian." He stared ahead, eyes unfocused, jaw clenched like he was chewing through memory. "After that, I made a vow. No innocence. No children. No bystanders caught in our crossfire." His voice dropped even lower. "And then I spent the next 20 years breaking everything except that rule. Until you showed up and reminded me it still mattered." Sofia's throat tightened. "You could have walked away after the restaurant. Let me go back to my life." Marco shook his head. "I couldn't. Not after what you did. Not after what it meant." His gaze found hers. "You didn't just save my life, Sofia. You disrupted it." The space between them pulsed with something unspoken, dangerous, magnetic. His hand moved first, barely grazing hers, testing. When she didn't pull away, he leaned in. The kiss came like a storm front, slow and quiet, until it wasn't. Until it was heat and desperation and breath stolen between moments that felt too big to survive. Sofia pulled him closer, fingers fisting in the fabric of his shirt, and felt him melt into her like a man who hadn't touched something soft in years. His hands were rough but reverent, trailing up her spine with the care of someone memorizing instead of claiming. It was fire. It was surrender. It was a promise made without words. When they finally broke apart, breathless and raw, neither of them moved. The moment had passed, but something had changed. There was no pretending now. No distance. No turning back. Marco stood and buttoned his shirt slowly, as if pulling armor back over exposed skin. "This changes things," he said. "Not just between us, but out there." He turned to face her. "I'm done reacting. I'm done letting them take the first shot." Sofia tilted her head. "What are you planning?" Marco's voice was cold again, but beneath it lived something new, resolve born from something more than vengeance. "I'm calling a sit-down. With all of them. Every boss who's been circling since Rico flipped." He walked to his desk and picked up a sealed black envelope. "They want to test my power? I'll show them what it looks like when I stop holding back. She rose slowly, brushing her hair back, still shaken by what had just happened between them. That sounds like a declaration. Marco nodded. It is. But I'm not doing it just to protect myself anymore. He looked her straight in the eyes. I'm doing it to protect what you gave me, a reason to fight for something more. That night, as the city slept in uneasy silence, the invitations went out coded, encrypted, unmistakable. Sofia watched from the bedroom doorway as Marco stood in front of a map pinned with red markers. What happens if they say no? She asked. He didn't look at her. Then I remind them why I'm feared. But first, I'll give them a chance to see why I should be respected. Sofia stepped into the room, crossing the line between his war and her heart. And if they come for you instead? Marco smiled without warmth. Then I'll burn everything down before I let them touch what's mine. His eyes met hers again. Starting with you. The warehouse smelled of cold steel, old secrets, and tension thick enough to taste. It was neutral ground, agreed upon by all 5 families, a place where blood had never spilled, only deals inked and warnings exchanged. Tonight, however, the air crackled with something more than business. Sofia stood behind tinted glass on an upper mezzanine, hidden from view but very much a presence in the room below. Beside her, 2 of Marco's guards stood silent, watching the men below with practiced eyes and hands close to their holsters. Down on the floor, Marco DeLuca entered like a shadow clothed in precision. Black suit, no tie, sleeves rolled just enough to show ink and confidence. Every head turned. No words, no pleasantries. Just the weight of a man who had stopped running. To his right, Salvatore Carvalho. To his left, his second-in-command, Matteo. Across the table sat the heads of the Sierra, Giannetti, Alvarez, and Bianchi families, each flanked by their own men, posturing hard, but unsure. They knew what this meeting meant. No agenda. No negotiations. Just a message. Marco opened a sleek black tablet and placed it on the table without flourish. I won't waste your time, he said, voice low but slicing through the room like a knife. You've all heard whispers. Seen the chaos. Maybe even smiled, thinking I'd fallen. He tapped the screen. The video played. Grainy footage from the Caprice room filled the screen. A waitress placing a plate on his table. A scrap of paper. His eyes lifting to hers. The moment that changed everything. This, Marco said as the video looped, is the second my life was saved. He paused, letting them absorb it. By a civilian. A stranger. A woman who didn't owe me anything and risked everything to stop a war she didn't understand. The silence deepened. Marco straightened. Her name is Sofia Leone, and she is under my protection. His voice sharpened. Anyone who so much as breathes a threat in her direction, he paused, gaze sweeping the table, will watch their legacy turn to ash. The Giannetti Don Giovanni, older, graying, drunk on history, leaned forward with a smirk. You come here preaching honor, and yet you break tradition by elevating a civilian. He chuckled dryly. You've gone soft, DeLuca. Love does that. The room stilled. Marco didn't blink. Remove him. What? But the words didn't finish. 2 of Marco's men stepped forward, fast and silent, dragging Giovanni from his chair before he could protest. There were no screams. Just a door slamming shut behind him, echoing like judgment. Marco looked at the others. Anyone else feel brave tonight? No one moved. Not a breath. Not a twitch. Just silence, thick and complete. Sofia watched from above, heart hammering in her chest. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear. From realization. She wasn't just protected. She was now the line no one could cross. Marco folded his hands on the table. I'm not here to ask for favors. I'm not here to beg for respect. I'm reminding you what happens when family is threatened. And make no mistake, she is family. His voice rang with finality. The Alvarez Don, youngest in the room, nodded slowly. Understood. The Bianchi boss adjusted his cuff, then gave a nod of agreement. One by one, the remaining heads followed suit. Not out of loyalty. Out of survival. The meeting ended without fanfare. No deals. No handshakes. Just an understanding, sealed by silence and fear. Marco had not just reclaimed control, he had reset the entire balance of power with one ultimatum. Upstairs, Sofia turned to the guard beside her. Is it really over? The man didn't answer. Just opened the door for her to follow Marco. When she stepped into the hallway outside the warehouse, Marco was already waiting. His face was blank, unreadable, the mask of the dawn fully back in place. But when his eyes met hers, something in them softened. He didn't say anything at first, just reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You saw it, he asked. She nodded. All of it. And? Sofia swallowed. You scared them. Marco's lips twitched. Good. They walked together to the car, no words needed. In the back seat, the city passed them by, sirens in the distance, lights flickering in windows, life continuing as if it hadn't just changed. But it had. Not with bullets or fire, but with a promise made in front of men who feared no God, only consequence. Sofia looked out the window, then back at him. You made me untouchable, she said softly. Marco's hand found hers. No, you made yourself that way. I just made sure they never forget it. If you became someone's weakness and their world was built on power and enemies, would you let them protect you, no matter the cost? Let us know in the comments. And if you're ready to see what Sofia's power means in a world built on fear, subscribe to see what happens next. The city looked quiet again, but Sofia knew better. Beneath the surface, everything still trembled. The streets had stopped bleeding, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was tension compressed, waiting. Marco had sent his message, made his stand, but enemies didn't vanish. They circled, rethinking their moves, testing the edges of the fire without stepping into it, yet. Back in Marco's primary residence, security had doubled. No one entered without passing 3 checkpoints, facial scans, and at least 2 loaded weapons. Sofia didn't ask where the extra men came from. She didn't need to. One look at Marco told her the worst wasn't over, just delayed. He didn't talk much that week. He watched, listened, planned. And every night, he checked every lock himself. He didn't sleep in shifts anymore. He didn't sleep at all. Sofia stayed close, trying not to drown in the stillness that had taken root between them. She knew what it meant when predators got quiet. They weren't afraid. They were preparing. And whatever Marco was bracing for, it was personal. The confirmation came 2 nights later. Matteo burst through the front doors just after midnight, blood on his collar, panic in his voice. They took Nino. The room froze. Nino wasn't a soldier. He wasn't made. He was Marco's cousin, his godson, barely 23. Sofia stood in the hallway, heart cracking with the sound of those words. Marco didn't say a thing at first. He just turned toward the fireplace, jaw clenched so tight it looked like stone. Who? He asked. Matteo hesitated. Out-of-state crew. Jersey-based. They're working with Rico. The traitor. The ghost they hadn't caught. Now returned, stronger, bolder, and backed by outside muscle. They're testing you, Sofia whispered. Marco nodded once. And they think I'll break. The room erupted with activity, phones buzzing, orders flying. Salvatore stepped in quietly, already on the phone, speaking in coded bursts. But Marco didn't move. He just stared at the fire like he could see the past, the betrayal, and the next move all in one flicker of flame. Sofia crossed the room, stepping into the space only she seemed allowed to breach. Let me help. Marco turned to her, eyes sharp. No, she didn't flinch. This started with me. I finish it with you. You don't understand, he said. They'll use you. They'll try to break me through you. Then we don't let them. His silence stretched too long. Marco, she said, voice firm. I'm already in this. You think I can go back to pretending I'm not part of your world? No, he admitted quietly, and I hate that. He looked at her for a long time, something unraveling behind his guarded expression. Then he took her hand and pulled her toward the back office. Inside, he opened a locked drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick with documents. If I don't come back, he said, this goes to Salvatore. Sofia felt her stomach drop. What is this? Instructions, Marco said. Money. Papers. Safe passage out of the city. He met her eyes. If something happens to me, you disappear. Salvatore will get you out. New name. New life. Somewhere no one knows your face or mine. I don't want a new life, she said. I want the one we started. Marco's voice cracked. Then let me protect it. A beat passed. Then another. And finally, she whispered, okay. Marco pressed his forehead to hers, hands cupping her cheeks. You're the only real thing I've had in years, he said. I won't let them take you. Sofia nodded, eyes glassy but unblinking. Then win. By sunrise, the plan was in motion. Salvatore coordinated from the estate. Matteo tracked leads from Jersey. Marco armored himself in steel and silence. Sofia stood in the doorway as he checked his weapons, his team, his exit routes. One more thing, she said. He turned. Promise me you come back. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, I promise I'll try. She nodded. It was all he could give, and she took it. He kissed her like it might be the last time, but not like a goodbye. Like a promise. Like fire and steel and everything they hadn't said yet. Then he was gone into the city that had never stopped watching. And Sofia was left behind, holding onto the fire he left in her chest. The warehouse sat on the edge of the East River, long abandoned, but not forgotten. Steel beams rusted with age groaned in the early morning wind, windows shattered, floor slick with oil and memory. It was the kind of place built for ambushes and endings, and tonight, it would be both. Marco arrived just before dawn, his convoy stopping 2 blocks out, his decision final. This wasn't a mission of muscle, it was personal. Inside, Rico waited. The traitor wore arrogance like armor, flanked by the out-of-town crew who didn't know the rules of the city they were trying to conquer. Took you long enough, Rico called out as Marco stepped into the open, his gun lowered but ready. I expected more of a greeting, Marco said flatly. But I forgot, you don't know how to respect what you never earned. The room tightened as weapons were drawn, but no one fired. Not yet. This wasn't just about revenge, it was theater, ritual, old codes playing out in blood. You were family, Marco said. And you sold me out for scraps. Rico smirked. No, I sold you out because you stopped being a king. You got soft. Over a waitress. Marco's eyes didn't flicker. She's more than you'll ever be. Then it began. Gunfire shattered the silence like glass. 2 of Rico's men dropped instantly, clean shots from Marco's lieutenants stationed in the rafters. Marco moved with brutal precision, his shots calculated, measured. Rico ran deeper into the warehouse, dragging chaos behind him. Sofia crouched behind a stack of crates, heart hammering. She hadn't meant to be here. She was supposed to stay at the house, under guard, away from the crossfire. But something in her had snapped the moment Marco walked out the door. If this was the end, she needed to be there, not to watch, but to act. She moved through the shadows, small and silent, every step instinct. Marco was deeper inside now, bleeding from a graze to his side, but pushing forward, always forward. Rico fired from behind a column, forcing him into cover. You should have stayed in your mansion, old man, Rico called. You think love makes you strong? It makes you blind. Marco ducked behind a beam, clutching his side. Love doesn't make me weak, he growled. It makes me willing. And then he was running, closing the gap, gun raised. But Rico was faster. The shot rang out close final. Marco flinched. And then, silence. Rico staggered. Dropped his gun. Looked down at the small red bloom on his chest. Behind him, Sofia stood, hands shaking, the pistol still raised. Don't touch him, she whispered. Rico hit the ground hard. Marco turned to her, shock etched in every line of his face. You followed me? I didn't follow, she said. I showed up. He limped toward her, blood staining his shirt, but his hands still reached for her like she was the only steady thing left in the world. You saved me. Sofia shook her head. We're even now. He smiled through the pain. Not even close. They stumbled out of the warehouse together, Matteo already pulling up with backup and shouting orders. Paramedics were called. Security locked the area down. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Sofia kept her hand on Marco's chest over the wound, over his heart, until he finally let himself fall. The hospital was quiet, private, and heavily guarded. Marco lay in a recovery bed, 3 stitches in his side, bandages on his shoulder. When Sofia entered, he was awake, groggy but grounded. "You look terrible," she said gently. "You look beautiful," he replied, voice raspy. She sat beside him, not bothering to hide her worry. "You almost died." "I've almost died before. This was different." "I know." A pause hung between them, heavy with truth. "I've made a decision," Marco said finally. "I'm stepping back. Not out, but away. I can't keep doing this, Sofia. If I do, I'll lose everything. Including you." Sofia stared at him, trying to read the man behind the decision. "What does that mean?" "I'll still be Dawn. In name. But Matteo will take over day to day. Salvatore will manage the council. And you? I'll learn how to live without war being my default." Tears welled in Sofia's eyes, but she held them back. "That's a big promise." "It's the only one that matters." She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "I'll stay," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But only if we build something real. No more shadows." Marco nodded slowly. "Real sounds perfect." 2 months later, the bell above the door chimed softly as a pair of customers entered, the scent of garlic and roasted tomatoes drifting through the air. Sofia stood behind the counter of the new restaurant, Leone and DeLuca, tucked in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, small and clean, the kind of place you discovered by accident and never forgot. She wore an apron again, but this time it meant ownership, not survival. She carried the first plated pasta of the night to table 2 with pride. The recipe was hers. The door opened again. Marco walked in, jeans, untucked shirt, no entourage. He looked like a man, not a legend. Not a king. Just hers. "You still saving me?" he asked with a smile. Sofia wiped her hands on her apron. "Always," she said. And the city, for once, felt still. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.